you an entrepreneur looking for a platform to sell your products? Do you have a passion to join a community that teaches you how to circulate the black pound? Why not start your business on Shops Noir, the online marketplace for African and Caribbean vendors? You will be given your own store to upload your products. Once you've given your store a name, then let Shops Noir do the rest to market your business. To set up your online store, register at www.shopsnoir.com or telephone 0844 884 9221. Shopsnoir.com.
In association with the Pan-African Congress Movement, Sister Selina Kigwe, founder of Afrohistoricals and creator of Mojat, speaks. Come and see how Reverend Charles Colcock Jones' instructions to enslaved Africans has left its permanent mark on how black people worship today. Join us at 180 Years of Jesus, the Catechism for the Black Race, Sunday, 10th December 2017, 4 to 7 p.m. at the Mama Art Centre, 366A High Road, Tottenham, London, N17 9HT. Tickets on Eventbrite. They're £10 plus booking fee or more on the door. 180 Years of Jesus.
Hello, mate. What day of the week is it?
They asked me them question for.
I just wanted to know.
It's Thursday.
Oh.
And you know what I go on Thursday?
No, tell me, mate.
It's the Jam Master Show.
All right.
On Bless Radio.
Nice one.
Things sweet like Jamaican mango. Put a G and a O, that spells go.
Love it, mate.
Remember to turn on your radio and switch on your stereo.
All right, I'm doing that now.
Oh, DJ Jammers, I play right now.
Cheers.
Greetings. Thank you for calling in. And,
thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, you started off the show. I didn't have a chance to start yet, but thank you for
calling in.
That's
okay.
That's good. That's what we want. I
wasn't sure.
Yeah, so, you've got an event coming up this weekend.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. What is your event?
It's called 180 Years of Jesus,
wow.
The Catechism for the Black Race. So a lot of people don't know why black people always seem to stick to the same chapters and verses of the Bible. It's not by accident, but by design.
Right.
You know, a chap called Reverend Charles Colcock Jones wrote a religious instruction for the Negro to all his white brethren on how to instruct their enslaved Africans and even the free Africans how to worship and receive the gospel. And I can quote him. He said, the general preaching to whites will not answer the purpose, because there was lots of uprisings and church was used as a cover for our people to plan our freedom and liberation.
Right.
And so a lot of white people didn't want black people receiving the gospel. But because in the Bible it says that if you have the gospel and you deliberately withhold the gospel from somebody, your soul will burn in eternal hell fire.
Right.
So the white people were worried about that. And so that's what encouraged them to, produce this religious instruction, and also, encourage. It left us basically subdued Africans. So good Christians, but Christians that wouldn't demand their freedom and justice.
What was the name of the person who wrote this instruction again?
Yeah, it's Reverend Charles Colcock Jones.
Right. And when is your event? What time is your event taking place?
Yeah, it's taking place on Sunday the 10th of December, this Sunday at Sunday, 4 o'clock. Yeah.
So at
Sunday, where? At Mahat Centre.
On the Mahat Centre, yes.
Mahat Centre, yeah.
And where is that?
That's in Tottenham, 366A High Road, Tottenham. That's London, N17 9HT.
Right, and what's the start time again?
It starts at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock till
7.
Till 7. And if anybody wants to come, how can they get in contact with you?
You can get in contact with me on info@mojapp.com, which is UMOJAPP.com.
Yes.
Or tickets are on Eventbrite. You can just search for 180 Years of Jesus, and it will come up.
Right. That sounds interesting. Have you got any interesting people on the panel or on the speakers?
No, I will be doing
a
presentation.
You're going to be doing a presentation. Wow. That's fantastic.
I'll be giving a presentation on this, and I'll be showcasing as well the book written by the brother Kamal Mahesi Tehuti. He wrote a book called How to Make a Negro Christian, and in that book he did a commentary and analysis of Reverend Charles Colcott Jones' religious instruction on the Negro.
How much is it to get in again?
£10 plus booking fee or more on the door.
Right, okay. I will have to get you down here as well at some point, to find out what your research has led you to, That's excellent. That's excellent, yeah. Well, thanks for calling. We're going to be promoting that as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And also you'll be able to find it if you this show is going to also be on the Speakers Club on YouTube, and you'll be able to hear more information, this information as well again. So we wish you all success with your event, and we'll be promoting that as well. You'll probably see me down there as well, yeah?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
so you think it's really important. Why is it, what's the importance of us coming to your show as well before you go?
Okay, because a lot of us don't realise that the way that we worship, when we stand up, when we sit down, when we kneel down, when we, the hymns that we sing, they are all part of the indoctrination or the religious instruction, the catechism for the black race. It was specially developed at our people.
Wow. Right.
Yeah, so the scale of in-depth analysis that was done, in order to make sure that we received the gospel, but we didn't see ourselves equal in the eyes of God, was to make sure that we were focused on certain chapters and verses of the Bible. So that's why we're always repeating ourselves, we're always citing the same chapter and verse,
right.
And the way that we worship, we may think it's our own sort of style, but actually it was something that was designed for us.
Right.
So it's part of the emancipation journey that we need to take in order to, remove us or decolonize ourselves and free ourselves spiritually. So it's one of the wheels of the cog of the wheel, that we need to put all these jigsaw pieces together so we can understand, exactly how we came to be doing what we're doing, and why.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sister, I'd like to thank you for sharing us that knowledge, and definitely, I'd like to commend you for standing up and, coming forward to speak on religion, because this is a time now when we need to, anyone who's interested in the Bible or religion or, worship, they need to be coming to your event. Can you just give us the time and date once again?
Yeah, sure. It's going to be this Sunday at the Mount Ma'at Centre at 366A High Road, Tottenham, London, N17 and 9HT, at 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. Tickets are on Eventbrite. It's £10 plus booking fee or more on the door.
Right, thank you for that. Oh God, you got some more?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. I have another event. I've got 3 events this month.
Right.
That's my first event. I've got museum tours Friday night at the museum. It's on at the British Museum. I take people around and I expose the institutional racism that's on display there. So this month's theme for Friday night is the enlightenment of Europe at the detriment of Africa. So I'm going to give a walk and talk and show people the evidence of African culture and how that influenced and actually gave Europe its enlightenment period. So
okay, and so again, how can people get in contact with you for those events?
Yeah, they're all on Eventbrite.
Yeah.
You just look for Friday night at the museum,
Right.
or the Sunday tour is at 2:00 at the British Museum, and it's called Ancient Africans in Europe, Asia, and America.
Okay, right. Thank you for that, sister. And
all right.
You're welcome. You know, anytime you've got an event, you just let me know.
Will do.
Speak to Brother Minty. You can get my contact details. I'll be definitely going to have you on the station.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on your
You've
show.
got a place to be this Sunday. Make sure you reach. After this, we're going to bring in our first guest. Thank you, sis.
Thank you.
You're in tune to DJ Jammers on Bless Radio, UK's #1 station for great music.
I'm gonna say keep it burning, yeah.
That's right. Look at this goes out to everybody tuning in.
Let them see, let them see. Yo, jump. I see the ice in the slab.
In tune to Bless.
Shout it out loud, loud, loud.
We'll give you more, not less.
I stick in the cloud, never shade. Yeah.
You can even change your brain if you're feeling workless.
See the I stick in the cloud. Why I have to shout it out loud.
Man Carl Capleton.
I see the I stick in the cloud.
And we're well capable, and able today. Once again, it's the time of the day where you get your notebook out, close your windows, turn off your TV, and if you're driving, listen keenly. And the studio is full of scholars today. Boom! Right now it's time to start the show. Get your notebooks out, get ready. Another episode of Jam Master Live. We got Mantis, we got Minty, Brother Minty, Avi, everybody in the background helping this coming forward to the community. Special request goes out to the management, the ancestors for allowing me to come through here and pass on the wisdom and the knowledge, and for our guests to taking the time and trouble to come down to the studio. And the first guest today, we have Brother Lyndon in the house. Lyndon?
Greetings, Otep.
And
Yes.
I would like to thank you. You know, you shared some knowledge last week, you know, and we had so many callers asking for you to come again and speak. So how you been keeping?
Well, you know, everything is everything still. But yesterday I was on the train coming back from Southeast London.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, day before yesterday, to be honest with you, Tuesday, from a brother station. You see? And one black man, boy, I must have Tizik or something. Him come sit down next to me, and boy, I tell you, say, yesterday I'm gone, you know. The first time in 32 years me ever have cold. Yeah, I tell you, man. I me never catch nothing in my mole. So it must have been him. But today I fight it with my, you know, natural abilities and cure. And I'm here. Ready.
Respect. Well, today's show is going to be about identity. Once again, you know, the format is, when it comes to reasoning, you look at the past, then you look at the present, which is your value system, then you make choices, which is the future. So it's all about making the right choices and the right decisions. So I'm going to start on... Hold on. Critters, can you...
Hold on, no, man, because before I say something to the brother, because last week, you know, we had a bag of reasoning, and no one shake your hand, Lyndon. Me not like you, but you never shake your hand because...
Yeah, man, warm welcome that still.
My relationship done off last week because she said that me come like an idiot in the studio. And me wanted to get rid of the woman for the last 10 years. She just give me pure grief. Everything to find out that me sleep with her sisters, mothers, daughters, aunties, grandma.
Why?
And me was innocent. The woman now was for 2 months. So me pass out innocent.
You sure your identity at work, my brother?
But what me need from you?
Identify with?
Yo, what me? Can you get me a passport? Because certain man I look for me now, me need to change my identity.
No problem, my brother. I got a wonderful passport for you. May I give you the cure for change your identity?
Right? First question, me want to know who me is how me is, why me is, and what me is. Lyndon.
Come to the right medical and mental doctor. You see, they call me the mental farmer, and them not call me that for nothing. So, good evening, everyone. I want to first of all take this opportunity to thank the group in South London, which are called Black Fathers, and the group called Black Mothers. I do apologize for not coming to see you yesterday, but I was none too well. Okay? So I trust that everything went correct and nice with the priest, the high priest that was there with you. And I love all the knowledge and wisdom and meaningfulness. Right now in this studio, we have a whole heap of talent in the studio. And I'd like to start off by reminding you that last week I read to you from some of my research, and I aim to do that again, interspersing with comments from my fellow presenters in the studio, and also to question, anything that you don't really think you get your head around right now. It's fine. It's okay. But we really and truly want to hear from you, Massive, whether you text or your phone. Please do so, because then it make it worthwhile coming out. We don't want to talk to fresh air out there. We just want to talk to you. Bless you. So let me remind you, last week we spoke about identity, how valuable it is to each of us, how we find whom we are or whom we are becoming. One of those two statements are true. And I want to leave that in your mentality to satter, but don't flatter or batter. Right now, Brother Dougie is in the other chair, and I know he wants to say something, and I'm going to give him the opportunity. But before I do you mind, Brother Dougie, if I just remind the people where I get my information from?
That's what I was going to get to recap.
Okay.
From last week, so people are up to speed.
Yes.
In terms of what was said last week. If
yes.
That's okay with you, yeah?
That's fine with me, my brother. Thank you for the reminder. Yes. What we did last week, when we began, was to tell you about the basic concepts leading to identity and some things that I had found out the previous week about identity failure and identity success. I never heard of those before last week. It's very interesting. I've delved a little bit deeper, and I'd like to bring you some more information. But before that, as Brother Dougie suggested, and it's quite right, let's recap. Identity. What do you think it is? While you're thinking about that, I'll read you. There is a great psychologist called Glasser, William Glasser, and I love his theories and his therapy. He wrote something called reality therapy, and it says this: reality therapy asserts that all human, regardless of culture, have a single basic need. Just simple as that. This is the need for an identity. The need to feel that we are somehow separate and distinct from every other living being on the face of the earth. Brother Dougie, I yield to you.
No, I just wanted to continue the reading.
Okay, you want me to continue? Yeah. Okay, my brother, it's so good. I'm indulged in what you're saying, my brother.
And then we got other Theo and got a brother inside the house as well. So
okay,
bring them in.
All right.
No, you go on.
So
man. Go on the flow.
I wonder if that has impacted you. About you are just one of. There is not another of you or I or anybody else that you know. And I'm saying this even if you happen to be, identical twins. Even if you happen to be like the Iranian sisters who died at 42, who were joined at the head and shared the same brain. The amazing thing is, nothing bothered them. They got on exactly as they wanted to do. And at 42 years old, unfortunately, the bodyguards came in and said, let's separate you. And unfortunately, they died. But this is what really we got from that. we got to understand that one sister wanted to become a corporate lawyer and the other one a social worker. You work it out. I don't want to have to explain that, but does that explain identity? It's one of. Yes? We think we are perfect. Maybe we are. Nobody's told me yet how to evaluate perfection. But at the same time, if you know your identity, you don't need to bother about perception. You don't need to bother about perfection. Yes? And so last week we also stemmed from this to some other readings, but beyond that we talked about selves. And all the brothers in the studio gave their own answers when I asked the question, how many selves are you? There is no wrong and right answer, to be frank. It depends on what you think. But here is a bit of science for you. There are only two selves, and beyond that, there is the real you. I'll say it again. There are only two selves, and then the real you.
Okay then. All right then. I want to bring in some top professors who is got some big dusty books in front of them and scribbling some notes, you know what I mean? And they're gonna scramble my brain cells out there. Crazy, you know. All right then. We're gonna bring in Theo.
Yes. I'm not sure if this mic is working. It's on. But you need to carry on with your introduction, Sluggy. If I'm being received now.
Yes,
I am. Okay, well, first thing to do is give thanks to all the speakers before me, and a big hello and greeting to the listeners out there as well. Yes, Lyndon, that was quite an introduction, quite a very insightful thesis of sorts. What I was interested, because I mean, last week there was a 7-point breakdown of sources of identity. I was hoping at some point you'll get around to repeating that, so I can make sure that I kind of like got that all down in precise detail. Would you be able to do that for us at some point?
Sure, my brother.
If you know exactly what it is I'm referring to.
It is marked down as part of what we have to apply. Yeah.
Okay, cool. When it comes to I remember what I said last week is the way I looked at it, and I'm kind of like positioning that alongside everything that you've brought to bed thus far, and of course the ensuing questions and answers just went on there. And my original position was similar to what Jamus was talking about, is that I mean essentially, and it ties in with what you're saying, as it being a kind of there being a conscious element to it, and it being that more as being the principal element to it, in that I would say that it was overall someone's concept of self. You see, although you're saying, well, there's no such thing as self.
No.
So then my next entry into the discussion would be then, what generally is being accepted as being identity operates at a very low level of understanding and consciousness, right?
Well,
does that sound
from self to consciousness?
Well, I mean, of course.
Okay.
Well, self is something which is more or less an illusory type of thing, from what you're saying.
It's a delusion.
It's a delusion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a delusion?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Can I address any of your points?
Absolutely. Go ahead and address that. Go ahead and address that.
I hear what you say, Brother Theo, and I welcome all comments. I would not like to say that, there's no further learning than what I'm bringing you. But I'm quoting directly from the research, yeah? The fact about self is this. If there were no pronouns in the language that we speak, there would be no ownership. Self is an ownership. You understand? So, I own me. I call that self. Somebody else perceives me. They call that self. But it doesn't really exist apart from that. Because if there's only one you, one Dougie, one Theo, one Chef, one Janice, you have to see the point. The point is, there's only you. Who are you? Ask yourself that. And you're going to come out with something like this. I am that I am. That I am, that I am, that I'm not. The I am factor is who you are. Each individual has an I am factor. When we've explored and found who we are at that deeper spiritual level, we will understand, or rather overstand, that there is no self.
No self.
Simple.
Okay then. I know we've got a call coming and the brother wants to come as well. Burning. What technical there, James? Greetings.
Greetings, Brother Dougie. This is Brother Sion here.
All right,
calling up. And
Sion, you all right?
Yeah, I'm very well, brothers.
Well, no,
how you doing?
This is kind of your subject matter. No, we're touched by your subject matter. So, come upon us.
Well, we have talked about this before because the confusion about identity, and usually we use the corporeal aspect of ourselves to identify with, and then because of historical distortions, we're running around searching for identity. And then you have this idea of identity being constructed for people based upon what others external to themselves is like labels projecting, upon. People can formulate various different sense of identity based upon programming, conditioning, background, things that what then becomes called identity is what becomes so-called familiar to someone. Yeah? Now, there's a lot of things we got to be careful of, like when you're dealing with theories. Remember, a theory is a theory. It is not a confirmed fact or to say it's a truth. Truth would be experiential knowing, yeah, of that which goes beyond the reasoning and intellect. And we seem to rely a lot upon this reasoning and intellect rather than go to the awareness which goes beyond it. Before I came on, I was listening, and I was glad to hear where some of the discussion started to go to, which was about consciousness. Now, consciousness awareness would be the foundation of where one would be seeking through self-inquiry to know who they are. Now, you mentioned I am...
Sam, sorry to float. But isn't this one? The consciousness and the self is one.
You see, the I am that I was just hearing, I am that I am. Yeah. That's a formula. And I am would be the statement based upon the awareness of being. Without awareness, there is no registration of even beingness, that of existence. So consciousness is the substance, the primary substance. Consciousness would be the foundation where you, or the root source, you would look in order to align with this term identity. But the word you use, identity, the language and depending upon this dependence upon what we call scientific theories and so forth, as if to say, well, I read it in the book, that must be the authority, because whoever authored the book, the authority, and makes the information authentic, which we got to be aware that is not actually true.
Siam, I'd just like to, we've got an esteemed guest here, so I'd like him to respond to what you just said, yeah? So I was just going to pass it back to Brother Lyndon.
Yes, Brother German. Yes, brother.
Yeah, respect. The stage, yes, it's the same, but Lyndon, I'd like you to respond to what Brother just said.
Siam, greetings, Otep, yeah?
Hotep, greetings, Lyndon. How you doing, bro?
I'm here, my brother. Thank you for your statements, comments, and wisdom, yes? Basically, I don't see that you're saying anything different to what I said. Because we did mention about the consciousness. I understand what you mean about the I am factor, but it's probably the best way I can get the point across to, people who are less understanding of the technical abilities of who we are inside. Now, we could ask the question, who am I from now until next year? If we don't focus, as you say, our awareness on it, then we are not going to find where this consciousness is from. I also know that a lot of people think consciousness is a physicality within the brain, but we all know it isn't. Do you understand?
Exactly.
I know that lots of individuals have been under the misperception, okay? Because perception isn't really a bad thing sometimes, but sometimes it can be. But it's all based, my brother, as you will agree with me, on values and beliefs. It depends on your own personal values or my own personal values and belief, where we start to form this formulae, right? These formulae for what an identity is meant to be. But I'm saying it's not attached to anything. It's just simple consciousness. So I'm grateful to you, my brother, my learned brother.
And Sam, can I just have a brief response from you? Sorry, Sam, can we have a brief response from you? Then we're going to open it out to the phone line.
Yeah.
What's your response briefly?
What you said there, Brother Lyndon, was like when we use who am I? You hear the I in there?
Yes.
You can't run away from that. Yeah.
All right.
So whom and what is the I? Because the I, and when we're talking consciousness precedes matter. The idea that we have you see, remember, some of the scientific info and jargon that has been going around for quite a while has been based upon this belief that matter comes first and then consciousness is produced out of matter, which is rubbish. It's stupidness.
It's the other way around.
We have to be real with what that is. Consciousness is not a person. It's not the physicality or the thing. Consciousness is the formless awareness of being. Yes. That's the reason why when you look at your hand, you'll say, oh, I'm perceiving, I'm looking at my hand. But where does perception take place? Perception actually takes place within you, within the individual.
Sorry, Simon. We just need to. What it is, we're going to summarise this up. So if you can clear the line for a second, in case we've got another caller. But feel free to come back in. Yeah. So we're just
sure.
Excellent insight.
Thank you, my brother.
You've actually you've raised the temperature. So
thank you all.
So actually, so what we've done now, we're just going around the table we're getting a brief definition from our guests of what identity is. Then we're going to take it to the next level. So. Bringing in Shen now. Shen, good to have you back.
Yes, thank you very much.
So basically, at the moment, we're just trying to summarise what is identity. You've heard some comments from the brothers. Could we have some of your input, please?
Okay. I mean, we've heard many different examples and explanations of what identity is. Also, I was going to say that a lot of what we think identity is also comes from a cultural perspective and cultural worldview as well. So we have to also understand, from which cultural worldview are we looking at identity. And, when the brother spoke about theories, a lot of these are theories. When you look at the word theory, it comes from the word theos, which is the Greek word for their God, basically, Theo, or Zeus, basically. So, when we looking at terms, because I focus mostly a lot with words, and my understanding of identity, when you look at it from the root meaning identity, which meaning the same or sameness, I see it as how do you link yourself to, or should I say, how do you link your reality to other people's reality, and how is your reality dictated by other people's reality as well? Because we go by, you know, I am because we are, and therefore, and because we are, therefore I am. There is a link. And also when we talk about separateness, the reason why I don't really focus too much on separateness when it comes to spirit is because ultimately it's all one consciousness. And we spoke about consciousness. Consciousness is non-physical, it's spiritual. And it goes back to the concept of the drop of, you know, the drop of water from the ocean. The ocean is the collective reality. And we are the individual non-divisible dualities of that drop of water that is extracted from the ocean. And when we now go back to the ultimate, you know, formless matter, we go back to the ocean. And the question is that when we go back to the ocean, can we really find ourselves in there? No, we can't.
But I wonder if we could just throw something there as we... as part of the reasoning, because when we talk about consciousness, right, the collective consciousness, are we talking about our ancestors?
Yes, ultimately, we're talking about our ancestors. We're talking about, like, in the Ifa you have the Orisha, in the Neteru, or the Tamarian spiritual cultural system we have the Neteru. You know what I mean? And then in the Voodoo we also have the Loas. You know what I'm saying? These are all then in, you know, in the Christian we have the angels, and in the you know, the Hebrew we have the Elohim, blah blah blah. It's the same concept, basically.
Same concept.
Just to summarize of what you've heard so far on identity.
Well, based on everything
from your standpoint,
what I've heard thus far, there's precious little for me to actually add to that. To be quite honest, I'm pretty much on board with all that. I can't really add too much more to what's been said thus far. Really, I think the bases have pretty much been covered. What I was actually aiming at when I first spoke was that, which has pretty much been confirmed throughout the room, is that the level in which your general population, if you were to say it like that, evaluates identity, right? Is like what you said. There's an association with certain qualities and attributes, and the sum total of that evaluation at a certain level is going to be their identity.
Right.
But obviously, above all of that is a level of consciousness and awareness. You see, which doesn't come into the evaluation process as a normal rule. Would you say that? So that's I think that's where a lot of people are dealing with the whole idea of identity. Once you brought in, as Jen brought in the factor of culture now. Now culture obviously establishes a whole set of customs, a whole set of beliefs, a whole set of values, and all of that then is brought into that evaluation of who a person is. One thing, the list I wanted Lyndon to repeat, I remember at one of the levels was sources of identity being socioeconomic status, which then that ties in with the whole materialism aspect of things, when the whole idea of your substance is linked to acquisitions of material value or supposed material value, which
goes
is
back to ownership, right?
Precisely goes right back to that. You see, rather than the ownership of, you know, internal consciousness, it's the internal, you know, the ownership of outer goods that actually, you know, is a bigger impact on their evaluation of their identity. But then we also know it's a lot bigger than that and considers a lot more things. Even if you really want to, you have to get past the thinking in any case, you know, to have the experience of being, which is consciousness.
Thank you for that, Theo. Dougie, so far, how do you think it's been going so far from the guests so far?
What?
You learned anything yet?
Oh yeah, definitely learned a whole heap.
And I think they're just
and it's always going on learning. You know, I mean, there's a lot to explore. The other thing about identity, you know, I mean, I look at it slightly different and listen to what the reasoning now. I've looked at much more deeper now. The other thing about identity, you know. But I still want to wrestle the other thing about identity with Lyndon. The other thing, and we said that you can't see identity with the self. You said that self is the self, but it don't link with the with identity. And somehow that's what I'm wrestling with. I see us all put as one.
Well, before you get into that part, there's another aspect I want to go into, and we're going to come back to that, so keep that point in mind. Basically now, there seems to be an attack on our identity, yeah, of who we are, or somebody's trying to determine your identity, you know. So I want to go around the table, and then I'm going to come back to the expert. So my say is, I want to start off with you, Shen, which is a language. It seems like this use of vague language.
Yeah.
Firstly, how can you define yourself when somebody is telling you who you are?
Right, exactly. And I was going to go into the whole concept of identity crisis. You know, what we have at the moment is an identity crisis, really, you know, where it all started from, you know, actually started from before the reconstructive period, you know what I'm saying? But in the sense of where we were taken from our own reality, you know, our, you know, so-called religion, our spirituality was taken away from us. Our names, so-called names, were taken away from us. Our cultural or cultivating system was taken away from us, and then replaced with an alien tradition, and you know, and then through the times, you know, we've been trying to, you know, reclaim our lost, so-called lost identity. So we went through many different forms as well of that, many different transformations. And I want to touch when it comes to the low level of this identity crisis, or the etymology level, is, you know, we've been given through time like names like Negro. You know what I mean? We've been given names like Black and coloured, which I would put them all together as in NBC. So we've been given all these terms, Negro, Black, coloured. When you are filling in forms and applications, you see all those denominations. You know, where do you want to tick? You want to tick on, you know, which ethnic minority are you from, basically. Even when you break down the word ethnic, coming from the word heathen, ethnos, minority is a minor, is a ward, is a child. So we got to look at, you know, how other people have imposed their identity on us, basically.
Linda, what would you say about what Shen just said about this imposition of somebody else putting an identity on you? What's the effect that would have on us?
Us thinking that we have selves. That's what it would do. That's what it actually does. It's such a great way. Thank you, my brother. Again, this self, it's a fallacy. It's an assimilation, okay, of ownership. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not a true ownership. It doesn't need to be. But some people will go to their grave because culturally it's been synced into their head through programming. That is what it is.
Theo, what have you got to say on that?
Hit me in the face. So now I wanted to just follow on from the whole, because the question of identity and obviously the crisis, as it were, that Brother Shen just spoke about, and obviously then this relates, in my view, to one of the things that Lyndon mentioned last week, which was we went round the room and we said, how many identities? I remember my answer was infinite, and Lyndon informed us that essentially there's two. Yeah, that's, if I can't remember your words exactly. You say it and I'll continue.
I said that there are two selves.
That's right. So
and that's what we identify with. Yeah, generally speaking. There's one where
how we see ourselves and how others see us.
That's correct. Absolutely.
More or less, like
not
that.
More or less. That's exactly true.
Yeah. So going from there, now that's that in the minds of, let's say, our people. Right? And because I say that because, you know, we go around and we collectively often refer to ourselves as being black people. Now that's a whole nother discussion as well. You know, that's something that I'm dealing with a certain piece of work that I'm actually working on at the moment. So, but then for argument's sake and for most listeners out there, we'll deal with black people, and then when you're dealing with that particular label as an identity, as a total evaluation of all that you feel you are, then between of those two selves, there is a conflict. That creates one of the reasons for that is because that particular label, that label of black, it conjures up connotations of, and the concepts are contradictory in terms of those connotations that very one word black introduces into someone's thinking. You see?
And it's almost like a identity apartheid as well.
Love that.
You know what I'm saying? So where you have many different people with their own perception and dilutions and reversions and versions of who they are arguing. You see this in the soul conscious community as well. You see this in social media. You have so many different people claiming a certain identity that most of the time is not even theirs in the first place. Arguing, lost in translation, and basing the arguments on an alien or alien, but that's another thing. An alien tradition.
Yeah.
Lyndon, so it's not sounding good for us at the moment. So what's your solution to this?
Because I'm telling you, as Brother Siam said, there is only the I. I am is a description of where you want to be when you are talking about who am I. Let me just quickly go to Theo's point, and you're absolutely spot on. Now let me just gently, I haven't forgotten the Brother Dougie.
No, we're going to wait. Dougie's coming.
All right, but let me say this. Just think of the word myself. Okay? Just think of myself. What does that denote to you? Any one of you. Come to
Possession.
Possession.
You have a possession.
I. Myself.
You think it's I? Okay, no problem. Yes, Brother Clement.
It really means we're becoming a master of somebody else.
Yes, Brother.
Ditto with Shen. Possession.
So, you see, it's so clear. It's crystal clear. Now, let me mention a word. Stereotyping. What does that bring into your consciousness?
Assumptions.
Of
what you're perceiving.
Am I stereotyping myself?
Not you per se. Or you said the nature of a stereotype is an assumption of something that you evaluate from within yourself.
Well, it might well be. You could be right, because some people live that. But it's normally from somebody else. About somebody.
That's right, yeah.
That is not them.
Mm-hmm.
So, think about it. If I'm the stereotype of what some other race think of me, that's a self. That's what I'm saying to you. So if I live that perception, as some of the young folks are out there doing, because they don't know any better, you see it leads to destruction. Destruction of the inner self, so you can create nothing from inside, but you live all that's outside, and you bring it inside. That's how I know the person doesn't know their identity. When they blossom from inside, and they bring it on the outside and show how beautiful and spiritual we are from inside, now I will congratulate that person.
That's right.
Okay then. I don't want to wrestle still, but
wrestle, man.
You better have a burning point, because what do you point you want to come in? No. So I can wrestle with Lyndon still, right? All right then. But would you say then, right, that once you identify yourself as an individual, right, you understand yourself, and you have a purpose, right? Wouldn't it be right to say that, therefore, right, you're able to know oneself based on identity?
I'd like you to ask that question again, please.
What I'm saying is that once you identify yourself, right, and you have a purpose, because see where I'm just losing a bit. I see the two of them as a marriage. I don't think you divorce the two of them.
The two of what?
Identity and self.
But that's what I'm saying to you. There is identity and there is self. I'm saying they're separate. They're two separate entities. One is based on perception
That's
of somebody else thinking about you,
That's
Brother Dougie is.
Yes.
And the other one is you owning the self that you think you are, based on culture, based on values and beliefs, and the other 5 diamonds that we have here.
All right. So they don't see them as one then?
Well, no.
Okay.
No, I will say no, because, Brother Dougie, the way I see it, I know you mentioned about purpose, and that's very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to add, and mission.
Mhm.
I'm sure you'll agree with me.
Mhm.
So, the inner has an identity about a purpose and a mission.
And a direction, yeah.
But I'm still saying that's further, it's a chain, it's a process. And if I don't know who I am, what purpose am I serving?
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
I cannot start on purpose until when I know exactly who I am. That's what makes me do I coaching. Because I want to teach people that this self is some false illusion given to us by the slave master.
Well, thank you for that. Because after the break, we want you, Lyndon, you to tell us who we are. All right, after the break.
Me can't do that.
Jam Masters, see? How you know, say John Holt say, son boy, you have a bite the dust tonight. Bullet!
All right, we're back in tune, Bless Radio, and the topic is starting to warm up. It's identity. We've had some very, very, very interested initial comments from our guests defining what identity is. Because remember, this is all about making the right choices in life. This is what we're about here, to the subject matter. But today we're discussing identity. So we've looked at the different types of identity from Brother Lyndon, and we also had a great call from Brother Siam. And so far we've come up with identity is something that is something that you have within you, or it's what somebody else has imposed on you. And now we're looking at how do we use this knowledge to move forward. We've got a call, I believe, a question from is it Nigeria?
Yes, Nigeria, Lagos.
Wow. and that was the ad break. So after the ad break, back to the question. Identity. The topic is identity, and we're looking at moving forward.
Yeah. I mean,
what is the question?
Yes. So this sister is from Nigeria. Her name is Tamara, basically, and a conscious sister. I've known her for a very long time, and she's posing this question. Basically, she says, in my opinion, identity crisis is of a Western origin. What's your take on it?
My take?
Yes.
Over to you, Lyndon.
What's her name, sister?
Tamara.
Sister Tamara, greetings, Otep. I love your question. I agree with what you say. End of story.
Wow.
Yep.
And Sam, if you're listening, we'd like to hear from you as well. So if you got what was the question again?
So the question is in her opinion, she posed that, in my opinion, identity crisis is of a Western origin. What's your take on it?
And you agree? So why would you agree with the sisters? What is it about the Western?
Okay,
the Western is in a crisis
look,
of their identity?
we cannot deny the influence of the Western way of thinking. Mm-hmm. That's what made them give us a language called English, which is the most toxic language on the planet Earth. So they utilize the language as a whip. Lots of people just see the physical whip, but they do not really understand that the whip is the language. Ask yourself how racism goes from one generation to the next. Only one. The language.
Right.
Do you understand? So you got to be cognitive of that. Mm-hmm. And sisters, Tamara is absolutely spot on. I'd like to confirm how spot on she is. I have some research here, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I'm just going to give you a color. Orange. Gonna give Brother Dougie a color. Green. Brother Shem a color. Yellow. No, you're yellow and you're blue. Alright? So here's a little bit of research where we're just doing a selection of brain color communication. Now, because we said it is to do this identity thing is a one-off for each of us, and it is unique. Hear how unique we are. Communication style. Let's just take that as a topic. The yellow brainer, put your hand up please. Right. Theo thinks that communication style should be polite, stay on track, and tell them details. Who is the blue brainer? Shem? Yeah. He shows his sincerity, uses stories, and connect personally. Brother Dougie, your colors are again green? No small talk. Be brief and give statistics.
Critters, what critters color? Hey, we are orange now. We are say bro.
Orange critters. Listen.
We are say bro.
You're very direct.
You know say. What? Yeah.
Quick to the point.
Yeah, man.
you give results. How accurate is that?
So, based on that now, you're showing that we have different ways of communicating internally.
Our style, our preference,
a natural style,
for communication as a one-off, as a unique identity, consciousness, brings out those answers. And you will find that they do not apply to the blue brain. I mean, yours doesn't apply to the blue brain, and the blue brain doesn't apply to the yellow doesn't apply to the green.
I think we've got Shen bursting.
Yeah, I'm bursting to say something because, yes, sir. Yes, brother. Basically, that really connects as well when you go, we spoke about culture, identity, and from cultural worldview, from, again, going back to the spiritual consciousness or the spiritual reality of, the spirit world, the Orishas and the Netters, how each person is born under a specific netter, or what we call now zodiacal sign or zoo sign or zoo cycle, basically, right? So each indivisible jewel is born underneath a certain sign that has certain characteristics, which somebody from another sign doesn't have those characteristics.
Correct.
You right?
Correct.
Even though they may have elements like the yin yang, but ultimately they have their own standing, right? Okay. Yeah. So that's why I'm connecting with that.
Can I just come in before Theo comes in? Basically, as well, if you're going to break it down simplistically for a man like Critters,
simple,
what I'm just trying to say is, it's a simple thing like a nature.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a different nature, and a bee can't tell a ant how to act,
right?
Because it would never know what it's like to have that nature. So I think this is a problem that we're having, is that we're not allowed to express our nature because somebody else is telling us who don't know who we are, how we're supposed to be.
The Western society, you've got it in one. You see, until they came and spoiled our, I wouldn't say culture, in fact, I would say our identity with our African roots and our ancestors. We followed that all the way, we would have been clear now. We'd have been clear. But because we've been indoctrinated, yes, with all this poisonous stuff, values and beliefs that some of us are living and believing it's ours. We've got to sata and say, let's go into some medi and take out, like you'll be cleaning out your cupboard. You find things in there that you never wanted. You've been hoarding it. I call it a hoarding mentality.
Boy, I've been following the medi on a doctor, just like Theo, you agree? We don't go doctor. What you say, Theo?
Right. Following on. Lyndon, you're absolutely right there. When you talk about the language being the cornerstone of our response to the sister's question, and just to further that along a little bit, you see, yes, the reason why it spans such a great period of time and reasserts itself over and over and over again, of course, is a word that's very familiar to Shen and Jammers. It's inherent in the language, the etymology of the language. It's explicit in the communication. which is often referred to by a very big word called the epistemology of things, which is basically the science of knowing.
So that epistemology.
Epistemology.
Epistemology. It's not going to the toilet. It's
No. It's not, nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. and then besides
the science of knowing. Yes,
besides all of that, I mean, you said language. I'm not trying to take anybody to task, but there was one point where, and I still continue to this day to question the standing of English as a legitimate language, but. That's another thing for another day. But then one of your presentations I went to earlier on this year confirmed one of my assessments about English when I said to somebody, look, English, whether you want to call it a language or not, is custom designed to include dimensions for ambiguity and deceit. And then you presented that it's considered in their own academic circles and their own academic ideas to be an equivocal language. You see, and that is the effectiveness of it when you can actually transform falsehood into truth just by the way you make something sound when you say it. And that's one of the key chains that binds people's considerations of all types of matters, including those important like culture and identity and belonging and so on and so forth.
Well, I've got to just jump in here.
Yes, my brother.
Because from what I'm listening now, the reason is that it's about language, was the confusion. And based on the reason what Simon was saying earlier on and what Lyndon, we're talking about the high level of consciousness, right? No, the people listening right now wonder, boy, what am I talking about and rare. But make it more simplified. What is consciousness? Because people are listening right now want to know what is consciousness we're talking about. So one can break down, anybody can break down what is consciousness. Because that's the way we should be aiming for, that vibration of consciousness.
Okay, consciousness is a spiritual realm. And I don't mean religious.
Yeah, you have to be clear about that.
Okay, I'm not referring to any religious. I'm not dispelling the facts about religion. I am not getting involved in it. I'm just telling that's what I, as a scientist, are talking about. Yeah, it's the conscious realm, is the spiritual realm. It's from within. Now, if you think about the universe, lots of people think the universe is a place we get to in a spaceship, but it isn't. It is all of our minds. Is actually the universe.
The universe.
Yes, collectively, okay, or singularly. Isn't that amazing? Singularly or collectively. So, where can we go from here? Do you understand? We can only grow in consciousness.
So God, we're talking about the God, the creator, so-called God. He's conscious. It's conscious we're talking about.
Well, two things. One, when it comes to the God philosophy, I want to tell you science has proven that it is in comparison and copying what the universe is meant to be. Because the universe is the creator. And what the universe has created for each of us, including the plants, the animals, everybody, is consciousness.
It's consciousness we're talking about.
You see what I'm saying?
Consciousness is everything.
It's everything.
It's everything.
It's everything that we live, breathe, dream about. Well, we call it dream, vision about, and stuff like that.
Okay. I want to bring in the brother there. You have your hand up, my brother?
Yeah, look, I just come in on that, on the God and the consciousness. It goes back to the Latin words. I can't remember the actual word, but it relates to breath. So consciousness in Latin relates to breath. God in Hebrew relates to Elohim. So both of them relate to the El, principle of the bull, which relates to strength. Just confirm what Lyndon said, because the bull's power is in its intensity, its ability to resist, and its repetition. So consciousness is based on your internal power or intensity to resist or to repeat something. It's internal strength based on that. I've got a caller.
You've got a caller on the line.
Caller on the line?
Yeah, Britain?
Yeah, good evening.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, I'm listening to your very interesting and engaging conversation. It's Buzzy here.
Yes, Buzzy.
Yes, Buzzy.
Yes, Buzzy. Yeah.
Yes, Buzzy.
I'm good. I'm just wondering. I was just wondering if I can actually even fit in the conversation, because when I heard the caliber of
Yeah, my brother, but don't say me and you are spark coming.
I'm just wondering, but very interesting, Deepa, but I was very intrigued about what Lyndon had to say about the self being something that is that doesn't exist in reality. I tend to go with him on that one, in the sense that I think the self is what we create based on our different experiences. It could be our family, it could be our culture, however you want to define culture. But by and large, who we see or perceive as ourselves, I think is something that is created by ourselves, based on those very experiences and you know that we were exposed to. But the question that I wanted to ask Lyndon, that is it, which one is more, would I say, I won't say the word important, but which one should we more cling to, in the sense, because you're saying that the self is an illusion, and of course you cannot hold on to an illusion because it's something that isn't really there except in your mind. So outside of that, then who or what are we? If we're not, because most people that tend to cling to this idea of self, because they'll say mind self, they'll say knowledge of self. So when people say, you know, I need to have knowledge of self, what exactly are they talking about? So the question we're asking, if you put aside the self, then what do we not replace it with, but how do we exist in that sense?
Well, great to hear you, my brother, Buzzin B. Wonderful. Thank you for joining our program. You needed to have been here, but you probably couldn't be here physically. That's okay. Listen, my brother, I love what you say. I hear what you say. The thing is, it's not for me to tell other people. All I'm doing as a scientist is to lay down, you know, what I've got in research. It's down to each individual to determine the plasticity of self, the assimilation of self. I can go and learn to be a pilot, but before I can fly a plane in the air, I have to go into an assimilator. And if I believe that is the real plane while I'm training, then I'll learn. But I can never fly it from point A to point B, except for within the context of the computerized stuff. So it's the same thing. You mentioned about illusion. Well, you know, an illusion remains an illusion until we believe it, then it's a delusion. And that's exactly what I said. It's a delusion. And it has happened because of the indoctrinating factor. It is very powerful. I am also a hypnotist, and I'm telling you that I can induce somebody and give them some instructions post-hypnosis, and they're going to do it. So imagine that all those heads that got together and said, how can we keep these people down? Right? As Sister Tamara was inferring. How can we keep them down? Let them keep believing in self. Right? They'll never find their true identity, providing that they follow these rules. And so what they do, they involve us into ownership. All right? You hear somebody said, my car, my bus, my feet. Your feet are already there. What's the problem?
I think you want to come in.
The response, because I'm very intrigued and interested to pursue that line in terms of, you know, because you mentioned illusion. So if the self is illusionary, then who are we then? Most people, I assume, are using this idea about self. We talk about myself when they said I, you know, so I'm just, you know, intrigued to find out, or quite interested to find out.
Okay.
What do we do? And what our response should be if the self, if the argument is that the self doesn't exist and it's illusionary, then most people, I would assume, I could conclude or lead in illusion. illusionary lives. So, what I want to know is how to get them not to lead or live illusionary lives.
Okay, great question again, as usual, Buzzy B. As an educator, I know you would be testing me very hard. So it's cool. I love it. I love the challenge, my brother. All right. So, go ahead, my brother.
You want me to?
No, I don't know. Do you want to continue, or do you want?
I would want other people, to contribute to the conversation as well.
Of course. All right. So let me say this: if you then take the point I'm making about selves, the self that is being purported upon us by another individual. Let's just put it that way. And then there's the self that through values and beliefs, culture and all this sort of thing, we tend to believe we are. If we can dispel of those, even suspend them for a while you meditate on whom we are by asking one simple question: who am I? Ask it so many times that you're bound to answer it. And oh, by the way, we do have internal dialogue, and that will help us to find exactly the answer to that question. So I yield to my other brethren in the studio.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Shen. And also, stemming from what you're saying, when you talk about going in within yourself, we need to switch off all the distractions as well,
Who's speaking?
Shen. How you doing, brother?
Right. Can you speak up a little bit, because your voice sounds a little bit inaudible. So
yes, can you hear me now?
A little bit? Yes, I can.
Can you hear me now? Okay, so I was saying that, it goes back to also, I think, Lyndon, you touched on the fact of going within yourself, right? Or shall I say, go internally. Right? And, when I started to realize who I was, I had to many times go within myself or within internally. I had to disassociate myself from the distractions that were put me off track, basically. Yeah. So meditation, also detox. I mean, I was even going to say, the way you eat, what you eat. You know what I mean? And it also goes back to detoxing and cleansing. I found that when I started to detox and cleanse and started to change my way of eating, I started to, there was other realms that started to open up within myself or within me. And I think a lot of the identity crisis is not just on an intellectual level, it's also on a way of life level as well. I mean, we've been displaced also, our cultural lifestyles, our way of life as well. So I think that's very important that we have to go back to looking at, what are the necessary tools and the necessary essence that can bring us back to our true eyes. Realize with our real eyes, not with other people's eyes.
Brilliant. Are you still standing, Buzzy B?
I'm still here. I'm actually standing. I'm listening because I'm, as you know, Lyndon, I'm here to be informed. I like being informed. I think it's a very, interesting conversation and insightful. And I'm learning as I go along and as I listen. But it is just a question. Just a question that popped in my mind.
But Buzzy B, I can ask you a question. I know Theo Paul wants to jump in here, but can you get away from the self?
Can you get away from yourself? I think it all depends on what you see as self, really.
All right. From me say,
what you see as self. You see what I mean? So I'm not quite sure how I can answer that question because the next question that follows from that is, if we decide who we are, both as an individual, and that's another word as well. Are we who we think we are, or who we say we are, or who we purport to be? Because who decides who we are individually and culturally, and even culturally? Who decides that as well? Who we are. I'm not talking about our historical experience. I'm talking about, suppose, in a original state, even before we were brought to the West. I'm talking about who decides all of that. If you look at the word individual, is the individual the self? That's another question that could be thrown up there.
Yeah, but hold on.
I am this kind of individual.
Yeah, but
I am this kind of individual and that kind of individual.
But you see, when Chen,
right,
they say that, I mean, when he had to go within himself to meditate, the word self keeps coming up again over and over again. So I just
exactly. That's what I'm wondering. What are you said? If according to Lyndon, that it's illusionary, and we create this self, are we looking into this very self that is illusionary? I don't know. I've just answered the question. Because what is the self then? I think what is the self is the question I think that should be asked.
Okay. Phil.
Right. I'm going to run now because I've got to go. Because I've got a meeting. So I just thought it was so interesting. I had to put in my 2 pennies worth.
Thank you. We'll be hooking up later.
Thank you guys. You've done a brilliant job. Fantastic job.
Yes,
thank you, Buzzin B.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your contribution.
No problem at all.
Peace.
Okay, even though Buzzin B is gone, I'll catch up with him later on this evening, and we'll probably continue the conversation. Taking on again from Shen, nice little rhyme there, and you see, last week, and it came up briefly again, this the stolen culture angle, or the removal of culture, and I took slight issue with that, but not to berate you anyway, but I keep looking at it in terms of either disruption, or as what I put down here is a discontinuity of it, and it leads in, or it kind of like reinforces what you were just saying previously, Shen. So within all of that, okay, yeah, we keep saying these words, reality, self, consciousness, and then we have to bear in mind that, yes, we're using a language that we didn't speak prior to cultural discontinuity and disruption. So we have to wade through all of that. We've got another caller coming through. Okay, I'll wait and see who that is.
Okay. Sorry, Theo, let me just take this call then.
Yeah, okay. Can you answer that?
Yeah, I'm trying to answer, but it just won't.
Caller, you're on the air.
Greetings,
brother. Brother Sam here again. I'm just listening to give Theo his space to finish what he's saying.
Yeah, let's Theo finish what he's finished, and then they come back in.
Yeah, most certainly.
Okay, where was I? Well, I was just saying, so we're grappling with all of these terms, and then of course we have culture here now. In terms of culture, and what you were saying was pretty much in line with what I'm saying here, in that when we speak about culture, then what exactly are we talking about? There's a general kind of definitive term of reference that comes from a guy named Wade Nobles, who says culture is a general design for living and patterns of determining reality. You see? So when we look at it from that point of view, then you can see that this disruption has had a huge impact in the way that we look on who we actually are, because you've pretty much absorbed all of these terms about yourself. You've absorbed different ways of actually relating to the world and yourself. Forgive me for using that word, yourself, again, but that's the way in which you pretty much interpret everything around you and what is supposed to be within you, with ideas and terms that you don't even fully understand the concepts behind those ideas, and even the terms that you're using are leading you down a path that's going to take you astray. You see, I could continue, but I want to hear what Siam's got to say.
Sam,
my brother.
Sam.
Yeah.
Yes. Lovely, beautiful. I'm very heartwarmed hearing this level of conversation. This level of inquiry. You see what I'm saying? Because for a long time we've been caught up in the garments, the layers, the superficial terminologies that so-called the word identity is being based around, and it's caused a lot of bloodshed as well. You see what I mean? Because, this attachment to these externalized forms, formulations of ideas, and also the mind, the mental concepts that basically generated from there, which are identified with. I feel it's very important to make a clear distinction between the mind and and consciousness, because these are also being distortions that affect our perception of what we would call what has been called God, and that inner realization of the true I within ourselves. Yeah, and I just want to maybe it may be a little digressing, just to clarify my point, and contributing to so much of what is resonant in this conversation that you guys are and we all are sharing in. To this word identity, you see, comes round to this thing, and it's a composite word, ID, entity, yeah? And we have terms of identity theft and this whole thing about ID you have to have upon you, which is a shortened abbreviation for identity, but it's a composite word. And maybe if we clarify what this construct has that we use to try to define and clarify to ourselves what we're talking about, maybe we can then maybe put it aside and get straight to the heart of things, you see, a heart of ourselves. Well, you look at the word identity, you got id. And id has been termed by the psychoanalysis the deepest part of the unconscious mind, which represents the most basic natural human needs, emotions, such as hunger, anger, the wish for pleasure, right? So this is what they call the id in psychology and psychoanalysis. You with me? Yeah? Yeah?
Yes.
And then we have the word entity. An entity, etymologically, comes down to being, existence. These are the terms: independent, separate, or self-contained existence. Yeah, the existence of a thing contrasted with its attributes. Right? There's these different levels of where it comes down to this word. Also, something that has separate and distinct existence, an objective or conceptual reality. Yeah, and then you come down to even how the word can mean organization, such as a business or government unit. You know, has an identity separate from those of its members. Yeah, and you've heard of corporate companies being described as entities. You see what I mean? Now, the root word breaks down. I mean, okay, we'll deal, late Latin and the French medieval and all of this. It comes down to this word, which is entité, and entitas, which really means denoting to a thing which exists. Now, when you look at the word existence, it's also a composite word of exit and stance. So it means to stand out. Yeah? Existence, to stand out. Now, have I made myself clear with what I was just saying there? Comprehensive, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so when we deal with entity, existence, essence, these are words. Essence is the most subtlest and the reality of each individual expression of the source of that essence. You see what I mean? Yeah? Yep. Which is awareness and consciousness. Because consciousness, the comprehensive nature of consciousness is awareness. So you cannot have consciousness without awareness. Yeah. Now, when we go to reason why going within is so important is that the truth or the law of existence is based on life emerges from the inside out, never from the outside in.
Yeah.
You see? So when we use the term consciousness, that breaks down to stios, which is to know, yeah, and con, to be together. Now, we do know that the phonetics of the words also has their deceptive connotations, because con, yeah, your pros and your cons, your rights and your wrongs, you see? when we're in a conceptualization way of thinking, which is the mind state, the mental, we can get entangled within these concepts and don't realize that whom we are seeking to attune with when we pertain to the I is not a concept. You see, this is why consciousness and the mind ain't the same thing. You see, in fact, mind is a produce from consciousness, just as matter is. Yeah? So, all right, let me pause for a moment. Let me pause for a second. Are you getting what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I was dealing with you. Yeah.
You see, so what I'm saying is that what makes it seem confusing for folk when you say going within, and Brother Lyndon rightly said, it's not for you, for him or anyone to necessarily tell you who you are, and then you accept that on a mental level and say, yes, that's who I am. Yeah, because knowing who you are comes through the introspection and the experiential knowledge or gnosis, that comes through and with that introspection. You see what I mean? Where that awareness that forms a strong conviction through the direct experientialness.
So hold on. So Sam, hold on a second. So
awareness of yourself.
Hold on a second. But that will come down to, as you said, awareness and your experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Let's hit there, because experiences, for example, there's these experiences that a lot of us or what has been denoted to identify with are mind-made stuff, mind-generated stuff. Okay, so your experiences does not necessarily pertain to who you are.
No. I mean, hold on. I'll probably look at it differently still. You know what I mean? Because you must take to a certain journey. It's got to be a journey to wait. But Sam, hold on 1 second, because I know people want to come in still.
Okay, so I'd like to thank, once again, we're a bit short of time still, so I'd like to thank you for your contribution, and we're going to have a little break, and also because we've got a guest and he's charging us by the minute, you see, so we need to be bigger.
100% agree with you, though, Brother Siam. Brother Siam, before you go, I want to tell you 100% concur with what you say.
Give thanks, brother.
Thank you, sir.
Being of accord is what, agreeable and being of accord is attained to harmony. And it's to harmonize ourselves with the living reality of truth within ourselves.
Yes, my brother. Yes, my brother. Thanks for the wisdom, yeah?
Yes, Sam. Big up yourself every time.
We'll have to get you down there in person as well, Sam.
We'll have a rest with Sam.
Respect.
Okay, brothers. Continue the good work. Take good care.
Bless FM. All right. DJ Jammers. Jam Masters, sin. You know, say John Wood says, son boy, you have a bite the dust tonight. Bullet.
Man about to them will rock for the officer. Lord, strange town comprehensive across the plain being where we live. Lord. Strange town comprehensive. Got to think more positive. Lord. Enter church to verse 39. Thought he was caught by a policeman. And this is what I heard him say. Meant to wait for me right away. Then I heard him shout and say, one go tell me, baby, nada. You go check the bill, man. Lord. fall. One go tell me, baby mother, bring a child closer, take me to the central. Oh, didn't know it would happen so quick. He was childhood showing stick. But if you play with fire, you must get burned. Until don't wanna really service.
You're listening to the Jam Masters Show on Bless FM with DJ Jammers. Jam Masters, see? You know, say John would say, son boy, you have a bite the dust tonight. Bullet!
Yeah, back inside Topic Consciousness. Like to thank once again the management, the hard-working management, all the DJs working hard to raise up the level of blessradio.org. Also the listeners, of course, the ancestors and the scholars in the studio. The topic for today, we've been discussing identity. What is identity? We're looking at how identity is applied. Now we're going to go into looking at good and bad identities, failure
and success,
failure and successful identities, and then lastly we're going to see looking towards the application. So Brother Lyndon, Steve Guest, I know you're charging us by in a minute, and I know you've come with a reasonable price with us. Firstly, I'd like to also thank Brother Sion, excellent, and Buzzy B, some excellent raising the temperature. So
and Sister Tamari.
And Sister Tamari, and also don't remember the event on Sunday, the religious event that's at the Mahat Center. So Lyndon, over to you.
Okay, so we don't have much time, but I'm going to cram in what I can right here to do with what Brother Jammers has just said about failure identities and also successful identities. So remember, we're talking about Glasser's therapy. And it says, Glasser views the teaching of responsibility as the most important task of all higher animals, and he means by that humans. He observes that humans are not driven by instinct to care for and teach responsibility to their children, but have developed the intellectual capacity to be able to teach responsibility well. Then he goes, the need for children to have love, support, and warm human involvement is emphasized. However, within the context of this involvement, parents must teach responsibility to their children. I'll leave it there because it's rather a long paragraph, but I'll leave that bit there, and I can just quickly, before anybody else comments, is give you the upside of that. So here's the upside of that. Although that was entitled parental involvement,
and this is in relation to in relation to successful and
failure.
Successful and failure identity.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
So I've just quoted you what Glasser says about how to get successful identity.
Right.
I want to go to the bit where the failure identity comes in.
Fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So that bit was entitled parental involvement, and now we have school involvement. I'm sure this will ring a bell with every single person out there listening. Although parental involvement is very important, it is vital that schools be involved in helping children towards success rather than failure identities. Many children who go to school have already started having failure identities, while others will have to struggle to maintain their success identities while at school. I know I can't read all of it, so I'm just going to jump from there to another section. Consequently, instead of developing a warm, personal love and worth, where am I? Oh, sorry, jumped it. Many children go to school, have already while others Okay, Glasser feels that many children fail at school because teachers deny that the child's humanity and needs for love and worth are primary. Very important point. Consequently, instead of developing a warm personal involvement with children and then helping them towards responsibility with a relevant curriculum which encourages them to think through issues, teachers focus on rewarding children for attaining goals which may have little relevance for them. The last bit, the critical school years, not just for socio-economically disadvantaged pupils, are between the ages of 5 and 10. I will read that bit again. Between 5 and 10. Children who have experienced much failure in school by the age of 10 will have had their confidence and motivation destroyed and will be acquiring failure identities.
Just to endorse with what you just said,
yes,
it's in the words. Look at the word children. The first 4 letters is chill, cold. Look at the last 4 letters in the word children, you see the word nerd. So they're making cold nerds out of the children. No humanity. Okay. Shen, you got anything to comment on?
Yes, brother, thank you for that. Just stemming on what Lyndon was saying about parents taking responsibility. I think for myself that's quite important, from the work I've done in the past, and I've worked with children as well, on many different backgrounds and environments. What I found is when you look at it from a legal perspective as well, a lot of our children, once you register the child, again, you no longer have possession of that child anyway. And if 9/10 of the law is possession and 1/10 is title, right? So I say again, 9/10 of the law is possession, and then 1/10, and when 1/10 is title. So they basically have the title over your children. So what's important?
Hold on, man, me not get that. Say it again, man. Say it again. Me not get that, bro.
9/10 of the law is possession. 1/10 of the law is title. So it's about who has the title over your children. So what's important is for the parents to reclaim not just ownership but also title over the children. And also when you look at, most parents have lost the understanding of what goes on with their children's development, or transformation. So we let obviously the schools and this is what's happening. A lot of our parents don't really understand, or the parents of the children don't understand, because they don't really have that much time with the children. And if you think about it, if those children are in school from what time we're talking about, from 8 until 3, and then sometimes they go to the childminder, right? Most of the times the parents are at work maybe from 8:30 to 5. So they're at work more with their work family than they are with their actual family at home. So what's important is also to be able to gain acquisition and title over the children, to dictate also what their learning is going to be, and to debrief them. Most of the times children come home from school, they so-called learn all these subjects, but the parents don't even have the knowledge of what they're learning, and then they're unable to debrief them as well as to what's actually going on in their mind.
Okay, Seal.
Good. Well said. Well said.
I'm just thinking of something, because the whole school element and just what you just said brings a memory to my mind. The one and only time I ever heard my father swear was during a debriefing session after school, when I ran my mouth off about learning about Sir Walter Riley, and my father let off. Now it's interesting, because I'm not gonna try it, because you mentioned that there wasn't a natural and a proclivity to nurture these identities from parents, but this is something and a skill that's been acquired over time. And then you also mentioned it's vitally important that during school that whole idea is reinforced, and obviously the implications of what you read in Glass's books shows that is very much absent in the school experience.
Let me bring
see what I mean?
Sorry, because of time, I'm going to bring Lyndon back into the
yes, my brother,
just to wind things up. Yeah, come true.
Okay, listen, I just want to say to all the contributions from our massive and the in crowd, the mastermind in crowd, I want to thank you very much for supporting this identity crisis. Okay? I want to say very much that, without your help, of course, I could not really function. Yeah, and I love to be challenged, Brother Dougie, all the time. So please keep challenging me. I can only get better at it. But, really and truly, I think you've heard some of the comments from some of the Massive, and I think they really had a real fun time out there, from what we have. Can I just sum up?
Yeah, Lyndon, could you also
When you finish, my brother?
I just say also include in your summary, how people can apply this knowledge to improve their themselves as well. Thank you. Yes, okay. Definitely.
Okay. Spirituality, I'm going to mention. Yes, we've mentioned consciousness, we've mentioned awareness, but what is consciousness if it's not awareness? That is the question to be asked. Okay, there are all different types of consciousness. I learned that there are 2 forms of unconsciousness. I only thought there was one. Yes, but apparently there are 2. One is called a precept unconsciousness. I don't want to go too deep into that, and that's for another time. There is also the logical mind, which is called consciousness. There is the subconsciousness. There is the superconsciousness, just to mention a few. All right? But all of this is not attainable until we design and discover our spirituality. And that is what determines the I within the self. Let me quote His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I. He was making a differentiation, as I had said earlier on, about spirituality. They have nothing to do with religion. Here is the construct that he's put forward, and I go by his wisdom. Quote, "We must stop confusing religion and spirituality. Religion is a set of rules, regulations, and rituals created by humans, which were supposed to help people spiritually. Due to human imperfection, religion has become corrupt, political, divisive, and a tool for power struggle. Spirituality is not theology or ideology. It is simply a way of life, pure and original, as given by the Most High. Spirituality is a network linking us to the Most High, the universe, and each other." I close.
Okay then, so I want to bring in Jammers into the mix. What? Chair, you still don't finish yet?
Come in, Chair.
Thank you. If I look on the light, say, boy, I'm not something coming back. You know what I mean? If you don't say them God takes and lick me, me let that back.
Yeah. I was just coming to just explain, even from the perspective of crisis as well. There's nothing wrong with crisis as well at the end of the day, because crisis gives us an opportunity for us to rethink things as well. So, crisis, when you look at the word crisis, cross, the crux, the crossroad, this is where you form your decisions as well. When you go back to the Orisha, it talks about Elegba, it sits at the crossroad, the opening of the way. You know what I'm saying? So, when you are in a point of decision making, you don't know which way to go, you end at the crossroads of decision making, and you consult Elegba. So there's nothing, being in crisis is not really a so-called negative or no gate thing. Actually, it is a no gate, because no gate means clear, right? So, but it's not something that is a disagreeable term. It just means that you're given an opportunity to now rethink and retract and redo, and be able to now take another take, basically.
Basically, on what you said, people talk about Christ.
Yeah,
who Christ is,
that's
but they
crisis.
can't act in a crisis.
Crisis.
So how can you know what Christ is when you can't act in a crisis?
That's
A
right.
crisis is when you come to the crossroad, and then it's the point of your realization when you cry,
That's right.
what is.
And then exactly, and then crisis will get cry ISIS.
That's right.
So crisis, Mary Magdalene.
It's cry ISIS, and ISIS is like your iris as well.
shedding tears.
So that's when you have your resurrection, because you can see what the crisis is, to resurrect yourself, as in the French word, back, and surrection, to become elevated.
Excellent. Yes, Jammers. Peace.
Okay, then what a fantastic round of rhyme and rhythm. You don't have the Estabochi man name inside the house. I would never try to test each other inside the place. You know what I mean? But it's all good. You know what I mean?
Something like just very quickly. Something just jumped in my intuition, right? I think that you two brothers, right, should do a rap. That's an etymology.
Yeah. Okay, so when the rap, no?
Well, no, they can do whatever they want.
Whenever they want. All right.
No, it's going to help.
We were thinking about
We need a pen to pen in what's the dependency on the pen, depending on our dependency on the pen. Because when there's no pen, our eyes have to be open. So we can't be sentenced by the pen, because we do not have a brain in ourselves to be reigned over, or a soul to be reigned over in our brain. So they can't train us to reign over us. In the word reign is the word NIG. The NIG, the Queen backward. Regina, thank you.
All right. Jammers of the cuff. All right. So you gotta understand why I'm here. I'm like the conductor, the referee. You know what I mean? I try to make sure to run into some kind of order and structure. You know what I mean? But it's been very stimulating. You know, being among some very scholars inside the host there. I've learned so much, you know, and continue. Well, Theo, where I'm coming? Theo.
I was minding my own business.
So why myself for coming?
Allowed to mind your own business. On this identity business.
Theo, you want to
No, carry on, Jackie. Carry on. Oh. Your summation was there in midstream, so
yeah, so
I didn't want to interrupt that.
Okay, then, so I'm going to bring my segment to the end. I'm going to ask Jammers to close the show, because it's been a very enlightening show. So again, we have to give thanks to the great man, Jammers. And Jammers, you need to tell the history, people the history of you, you know, because you never just come like out of the toaster like that, you know, Richard, you know. You know, they just pop up, so, you know what I mean? You know, he's got a history behind him, you know what I mean? If you tell the history that he was literally living in a caravan. You know, was it a caravan? Was it
a van? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and the writers were, you had the right of eating bread or cheese, and he started to look at things differently, and that's when the journey started from there. But it'd be good to let people. In one day, he will tell you his journey.
And that's right. And what made me actually is to look within. You have to look within, form a relationship with who you are. That's the thing is, you need to form a relationship with who you are to even know who you are. So that's the basic. And when you look at spirituality and consciousness, it both leads to your inner strength. The L is the bull, as I said, intensity, repetition, and resistance. So that you have to find your inner bull in you, you know. And to do that, the stronger you are is relating to nature, what you consume as well, and what you consume physically, mentally, and spiritually. So when someone tries to put another identity on you, just like you don't want to eat junk food, don't eat the junk ideas what someone's trying to put in your mind.
Can I just take this opportunity very quickly to hail up a very good friend of mine who is listening into Bless Radio from Long Island, New York. Hail up, my sister. Long Island, New York. Thank you.
Also, one big up sister Armani, who's listening from out there in Manchester. So I know she's texting and she's enjoying the show very much. So big up. Also, one big up all those who phone in. Big up to brother Sam. Yes. I know, so we're gonna have another conversation after this. You know what I mean? You know, so again, big up sister from what? Nigeria. Lagos.
Lagos.
Tamari.
Sister Tamari.
Tamara from Lagos. Yes.
Continue those texting, you know. Yeah, so give thanks. And all those who contribute, Buzzy B as well.
And also, I want to give thanks to one more sister called Sister Tonya from New York as well.
New York?
Yeah.
Wow.
New York,
International.
International.
Yes.
Good.
And I've just been contacted by Maxine. So Bless is going to be on Sky this Thursday. We've got an interview on Sky, so we're just moving bigger and better, you know. So bigging up Maxine and Sky. The Sky channel is going to be interviewing me this Tuesday. Also, do remember the event to be is at the Manhattan Center this Sunday. Bigging up Minty, also Supreme.
Okay then, so give thanks.
And we'll be continuing this next week. Same time, same place. Also bigging up Mantis behind the scenes. Right here on Bliss Radio. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. Do remember that this show will be on the Speakers Club YouTube channel, so you can continue the debate. Just go to YouTube, type in the Speakers Club, and you can hear the recording and continue the debate. It's DS Jammers and guests. Thank you once again.
Thank you.